Distance is one of the first ideas we learn to trust. From childhood, it is woven into how we move, how we plan, how we remember. We judge how far something is by how long it takes to reach it, by how small it looks, by how our bodies respond as we cross the space in between. Distance feels concrete because it is always paired with effort. A longer walk means more steps. A farther journey means more time passing. In this way, distance stays grounded in experience, tied to motion and memory. But this quiet agreement between distance and experience holds only within a narrow range. It works on streets and landscapes, between cities and continents. Beyond that range, something subtle begins to shift. Distance no longer behaves like a path that can be followed. It becomes detached from movement, disconnected from any sense of crossing from one place to another. The mind, accustomed to translating distance into action, finds itself without a familiar reference. When we look at the night sky, we instinctively apply the same rules we use on Earth. Brighter objects feel closer. Fainter ones feel farther away. The sky seems like a surface, a backdrop, a ceiling scattered with points of light. For most of human history, this was not an illusion to be corrected, but a practical way of seeing. The stars rose and set. They returned night after night. They appeared fixed in relation to one another, as if distance between them barely mattered. Yet this sense of stability was never evidence of closeness. It was evidence of scale. The distances involved were so vast that change itself became imperceptible. The sky did not appear flat because it was simple, but because it was too deep for human perception to resolve. Distance, at this scale, stopped offering clues. This is where the question quietly emerges. What does distance mean when it can no longer be connected to travel, effort, or change? What does far away signify when there is no conceivable way to cross the space, no memory of movement that can anchor the idea? The question is not merely about astronomy, it is about the limits of how meaning is formed. On Earth, distance is always relational. It exists between two places that share a context. A road connects them. A horizon separates them. Even the most remote locations on the planet remain part of a shared surface. In space, that shared surface disappears. There is no ground beneath the stars, no frame that naturally orders one point against another. Distance becomes abstract, stripped of the cues that normally give it substance. The mind responds by simplifying. When confronted with scales it cannot navigate, it compresses them into symbols. A distant star becomes a dot, a galaxy becomes a smudge. The true separation between objects collapses into a single image. This is not a failure of intelligence, but a consequence of how perception works. The brain is designed to prioritize what changes, what moves, what can be reached. When distance removes all of those signals, it becomes invisible in practice, even if it exists in reality. This invisibility creates a tension. We can know that something is far away without feeling that it is far away. The knowledge remains intellectual, never settling into intuition. Numbers can be recited, diagrams can be drawn, but the sense of scale refuses to arrive. Distance, once a lived experience, becomes an idea that hovers just beyond comprehension. It is here that the light year begins to matter, not as a unit, but as a response to this problem. Before it can be understood, it must first be recognized as necessary. It arises from the realization that ordinary language has reached its limit. Words like far, near, and even distance no longer carry enough meaning on their own. They were shaped for a world where space could be crossed, not merely observed. The question then is not how large the universe is, but how distance itself should be understood when it exceeds the boundaries of experience. The light year does not answer this question immediately. Instead, it reframes it. It shifts the focus from space as something to be traversed to space as something revealed gradually through observation. This reframing forces a quiet confrontation. To accept that distance can exist beyond understanding is to accept that human perception is not a universal tool. It is local, temporary, and adapted to a specific environment. The universe does not adjust its scale to match our senses. Instead, we are left to invent new ways of thinking that extend beyond them. Yet even these inventions carry traces of their origin. They are built from familiar ideas, stretched carefully into unfamiliar territory. The light year, at its core, ties distance back to something the mind can follow: the passage of time. It does not make distance smaller, but it makes it narratable. It turns separation into duration, allowing the mind to move forward rather than outward. This shift does not resolve the difficulty, it merely changes its shape. Distance remains vast, resistant, and often counterintuitive, but it becomes something that can be approached indirectly, through patience rather than movement. The question of distance transforms from one of reach to one of understanding. To think about distance in this way is to accept that understanding does not always arrive through closeness. On Earth, familiarity grows as space shrinks. We come to know places by walking their edges, by returning to them, by noticing how they change with time. In the universe beyond our world, familiarity follows a different path. We do not approach distant objects. We wait for them to reach us. Their light travels, steadily and without intention, carrying information across expanses we cannot cross ourselves. This reversal changes the role of distance entirely. Space is no longer something that separates observer from object through emptiness alone. It becomes an active medium, a span filled with motion that unfolds slowly. Distance acquires duration. Every distant star is accompanied by a delay, a quiet interval between event and awareness. What we see is never immediate. It is always already part of the past. This realization does not come naturally to the human mind. Our instincts tell us that seeing implies presence. If something is visible, it feels accessible. Yet, in space, visibility is no measure of nearness. A faint point of light can represent a place so far removed that its present state will never be known. Distance, in this context, is not a gap to be crossed, but a filter through which reality arrives, altered by time. The light year emerges here as a way to give structure to this altered relationship. It does not shrink the universe into manageable proportions, nor does it make distant places feel closer. Instead, it provides a frame that acknowledges delay as an essential feature of space. By defining distance through the travel of light, it aligns measurement with observation. Space is no longer measured by imagined journeys, but by the one journey that actually occurs. This alignment carries a subtle consequence. When distance is expressed as time, it becomes narrative rather than geometric. A light year is not just separation, it is a story about how long something has been unfolding without us. It suggests continuity rather than remoteness. The universe becomes less like a static map and more like a sequence of moments layered across vast intervals. Yet even this reframing has limits. Time, like distance, is something we experience locally. We understand it through change, through memory, through anticipation. When time stretches beyond the scale of human life, it begins to lose texture. A year feels different from a day because it contains variation we can recall. Millions of years flatten into abstraction, just as immense distances do. The light year helps, but it does not solve the deeper problem. That problem is not mathematical, it is perceptual. The mind seeks patterns it can revisit, movements it can imagine completing. Cosmic distance denies both. There is no return trip, no comparison between then and now that can be felt directly. The universe presents itself as a collection of signals arriving without context, stripped of the physical cues that usually anchor understanding. And still, meaning is extracted. Patterns are noticed, relationships are inferred. Distance, once detached from experience, becomes a tool for interpretation rather than intuition. The light year does not restore the sense of scale we lose. It replaces it with coherence. It allows distant events to be ordered, compared, and connected, even if they cannot be imagined in full. This shift reveals something important about knowledge itself. Understanding does not always depend on internalizing scale. It can also arise from consistency. When measurements align with observation, when ideas remain stable across different contexts, they build trust. The light year earns its place not by making distance feel smaller, but by making it reliable. In this reliability, a new kind of comprehension takes shape. It is quieter than intuition and slower than instinct. It does not rush towards certainty. Instead, it accepts that some aspects of reality will always remain larger than mental grasp. The goal becomes not to contain the universe within thought, but to interact with it honestly, using tools that respect its scale. Distance, seen this way, is no longer an obstacle to understanding. It is a condition of it. The vast separations between objects preserve information rather than erase it. Light traveling across space carries the imprint of where it began, even as it changes along the way. Distance ensures that the universe arrives to us layered, structured, and legible, even if incomplete. The question that began this journey, what distance really means once it exceeds human experience, does not settle into a single answer. Instead, it unfolds into a recognition. Distance is not merely how far something is, it is how much of the universe must pass between event and awareness. It is the measure of how reality reaches us at all. The light year stands as a reminder of this passage. It marks not a boundary, but a process. It tells us that understanding the universe requires patience rather than proximity, interpretation rather than immersion. The mind may struggle to hold such distances, but it can still learn to move alongside them, one measured interval at a time. And in doing so, distance becomes less about separation and more about connection, quiet, delayed, and vast, yet continuously present in the steady arrival of light from places we will never reach, but will never stop trying to understand.